The wedding was held in a glass pavilion just outside Dallas, one of those places that looked more like a museum than a chapel. My daughter, Emily, had spared no expense. Chandeliers, white roses, even a four-piece string quartet flown in from New York. I stood quietly near the back, adjusting the cuffs of my only good suit. It wasn't new, but it was clean. Emily looked radiant, and nervous. Her groom, Ryan, on the other hand, looked like a man who had already won something and couldn't wait to show it off. Every word he spoke that evening had the smug polish of someone used to being admired. I didn't care for him, but for my daughter's sake, I smiled. After dinner, as I was about to take my seat near the head table, Ryan stopped me with that same arrogant grin. "Sir," he said, "let me help you with your chair." His tone was syrupy sweet. The moment I turned, he yanked it back. I fell, hard. Glasses shattered. Laughter erupted. My daughter's smile died where she stood. The room roared. And something inside me went perfectly, dangerously still. Tell me where you're watching from, and hit like if you've ever felt humiliation turn into a kind of silence sharper than anger. The sound of laughter echoed long after I hit the floor. It wasn't just noise, it was a wave that washed through the room, ugly and mean. My hip burned, my palms stung from catching myself on the marble tiles. But the pain didn't matter. What mattered was the look in my daughter's eyes, frozen between horror and shame. For a second, she looked like she might run to me. Then Ryan slipped his arm around her waist and whispered something. Whatever he said made her stop. She covered her face, pretending not to see. That hurt more than the fall. I pushed myself up slowly. Someone, a waiter maybe, rushed over with a handkerchief and a trembling apology. Ryan just laughed. "Relax, Dad," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Guess you're not used to fine floors." The guests chuckled again. I didn't say a word. I just fixed my tie, straightened my back, and walked out of that ballroom without looking back. Outside, the cold air felt cleaner. My truck was parked at the far end of the lot, dusted with pollen, its side mirror held together with tape. It was old, but it had never lied to me. I sat behind the wheel, hands trembling against the steering wheel, and waited until my heartbeat steadied. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the laughter again. Not just from Ryan, from everyone. All those polished strangers who thought it was funny to watch a man like me fall. By sunrise, something inside me had changed. The humiliation had cooled into focus. I made a pot of black coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and pulled out a notebook, the same one I'd used to track bills and repair notes when I still ran my workshop. At the top of the page, I wrote one sentence. They laughed at the wrong man. At 8:03 a.m., I called my lawyer, an old friend named Robert Jenkins. He'd handled the closing papers when I sold my cabinet business 5 years ago. A straightforward man, quiet and sharp. "Frank," he answered, his voice thick with sleep. "What's wrong?" "I need a meeting," I said. "Today, if possible." He paused. "What kind of meeting?" "The kind where you start a war." He was silent for a moment, then said, "Come in at noon." I showered, shaved, put on the same suit I wore to the wedding, the knees still faintly scuffed from last night, and drove downtown. Robert's office was small but neat, with shelves lined with binders and a single photo of his grandkids on the wall. He didn't waste time. "Talk to me," he said. I told him everything, every word, every laugh, every detail. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he leaned back, steepling his fingers. "Frank, what do you want out of this?" "Justice," I said. "Not for the fall. For the disrespect." Robert studied me carefully. "You're not talking about suing him for damages?" I shook my head. "No. I want to hit him where it actually hurts. His reputation. His comfort. His pride. He thought for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, "You know, I might have something." Ryan's family, the Patterson Group, they've been buying into a development project near the river. Big money, but I've heard whispers it's not all clean. If that's the same Ryan, he could be knee-deep in something messy. I leaned forward. "Can you find out?" "I can," he said, "but it'll take time." "Do it. I'll cover whatever you need." Robert nodded slowly. "Frank, whatever you're planning, make sure it's not revenge. Those things don't end well." "It's not revenge," I said quietly. "It's a reminder." He looked at me for a long time, then scribbled a note and handed me a small card. "I know a private investigator who owes me a favor. Ex-cop. Name's Daniel Reed. Call him. Tell him I sent you." I took the card, thanked him, and left. Outside, the sun was bright, the kind that burns through anything fake. I slid the card into my pocket and walked to the truck. As I turned the ignition, I glanced at the rearview mirror, at my own tired face and the reflection of the skyline behind me. "You humiliated the wrong man, Ryan," I murmured. "Let's see how you handle your own fall." That afternoon, I called Daniel Reed. His voice on the other end was gravelly, calm. "Jenkins said you might call," he said. "What are we digging for?" "Everything," I said. "Start with Ryan Patterson, age 32, Dallas. Find out what's behind the smile." There was a pause, then a low chuckle. "You sound like a man who already knows there's something to find." "I don't know," I said. "But I trust my gut. And my gut says that chair stunt wasn't the first time he's tried to make someone smaller." "Fair enough," Daniel said. "Give me 48 hours. When I hung up, I didn't feel anger anymore. Just a calm, steady readiness, the kind a soldier feels before the first move of a long campaign. For the first time since the wedding, I smiled. Not because I'd forgotten the laughter, but because I was finally ready to answer it. 2 days later, Daniel called. His voice had that same low, measured tone, the voice of a man who'd seen too much and learned not to sound surprised by anything anymore. "I've got something," he said. "Already?" "I don't sleep much," he said dryly. "Meet me at the Iron Gate on Elm, around 7. Corner booth." The Iron Gate was an old bar near the train station, dark wood, neon signs, the kind of place where no one asked questions if you sat alone too long. When I walked in, Daniel was already there. Mid-50s, gray at the temples, eyes sharp enough to cut glass. He didn't stand to shake my hand, he just nodded toward the seat across from him. "You were right about your son-in-law," he said without preamble. He slid a brown folder across the table. "Name's Ryan Patterson. 32. Finance background. On paper, clean as a whistle. But that's the thing about men like him, their fingerprints are everywhere except on what matters." I opened the folder. Bank statements. Shell corporations. Photos of Ryan at a country club I didn't recognize, shaking hands with men in tailored suits and expensive watches. "What am I looking at?" 3 companies, Daniel said. "All registered to different names, but all connected to the same holding group, Everlane Partners LLC. It's a real estate front. They buy up condemned properties, push for rezoning, and flip them for profit. But here's the twist, every one of those properties was originally marked for veterans' housing projects." I stared at him. "You're saying he's stealing government money meant for veterans?" "Not directly," Daniel said. "He's smarter than that. He launders it through contractors who inflate costs, then Everlane acquires the project for pennies when it goes bankrupt. The money never touches his name, but it ends up in his accounts." My jaw tightened. "And Emily knows nothing about this?" "She probably thinks he's in real estate development," Daniel said. "Technically, he is. Just not the kind you can put on a brochure." I sat back, letting the information sink in. For years, I'd wondered what kind of man could humiliate another human being for sport. Now I had my answer, the kind who builds his fortune on the backs of others. Daniel slid over another page. One more thing. There's an email trail between Ryan and a guy named Travis Holt. He runs a construction supply company out of Austin. I think Travis is the link between the fake bids and the cash flow. Can you get proof? He smirked. Already in progress. But if we push too hard, they'll notice. Men like Ryan always have someone watching their perimeter. I nodded slowly. Let them watch, I said. Just make sure they underestimate us. That night, I drove back to my house in silence. The neighborhood was asleep, porch lights glowing soft and yellow. I sat in my truck long after I turned off the engine, the folder open beside me. Every page was a piece of a puzzle I hadn't known existed, but now that I saw it, it felt too familiar. The fraud, the arrogance, the lack of shame. I'd seen it before. In uniform. Overseas. Men who used power like a weapon because no one dared question them. Inside, I poured myself a whiskey, the first in months, and spread the papers out on the kitchen table. Numbers, dates, wire transfers. My old mind wasn't built for finance, but it was built for patterns. By midnight, I saw it, every deal Ryan touched tied back to one man, a lawyer named Dale Harper. His signature was on every closing document, his firm listed on every property sale. I picked up my phone and called Daniel again. Harper, I said. That name mean anything to you? There was a short silence, then a sigh. Yeah. Harper's a fixer. He's the guy rich men call when they need a crime to look like a clerical error. He's good, Frank. Very good. Can we get to him? Daniel chuckled. Not directly. But there's another way. Harper's firm runs their records through a third-party accounting company, Metro Financials. If your lawyer friend can get me the right paperwork, I can make Metro think I'm auditing their system. I hesitated. You're saying hack it? I'm saying nudge it, Daniel said. Quietly. We'll need your lawyer's help. And patience. The next morning, I was back in Robert Jenkins' office before he'd even finished his coffee. You weren't kidding about war, he said when I laid out the papers. Frank, this is serious stuff. If this goes public, we're talking federal crimes. I'm not taking it public, I said. Not yet. I just want the full picture. Robert rubbed his temples. You realize, if Ryan's this deep in it, your daughter's finances might be tied up too. Joint accounts, joint assets, she could get dragged down with him. I know, I said quietly. And that's why we need to act fast. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right. I'll prepare a request for Metro's audit files. Officially, it'll look like a verification of prior tax documents. Unofficially, he smiled faintly. You'll get what you need. By that evening, Daniel and Glitch, his tech contact, had everything they required. They set up in my garage, laptops humming, cables running across my old workbench. It looked like a command center. This'll take a few hours, Glitch said, typing so fast her nails clicked like rain. Their firewall's old school. That's good news for us, bad for them. Good, I said. The bad guys shouldn't get all the upgrades. At midnight, she let out a small gasp. Got it. On the monitor appeared a string of names, accounts, and transfers, hundreds of them. Millions of dollars moved through fake charities and nonprofits, all designed to look legitimate. But buried among them were real organizations that had gone under, veterans' homes, local rehab centers, family funds. And every time one collapsed, Everlane Partners bought the property. I stared at the screen until my vision blurred. He's robbing the people who served, I said softly. Daniel nodded grimly. And using their names to wash his money. I didn't sleep that night either. Instead, I wrote another line in my notebook, right beneath the first one. He mocked me in front of strangers. I'll make sure the whole world sees who he really is. The next day, I drove to a small veterans memorial park on the edge of town. I sat by the flagpole, staring at the bronze names carved into stone. Old friends. Brothers. Men who'd never come home. For a long time, I just sat there, the Texas wind tugging at my jacket, until I felt something click into place, not anger this time, but clarity. Ryan thought he'd thrown a man off balance in front of a crowd. What he'd really done was wake up a soldier who'd forgotten what battle felt like. This wasn't about a chair anymore. It was about character. About legacy. And I was just getting started. The following week was a blur of movement and quiet strategy. Every morning, Daniel dropped by with updates, coffee, and that same tired smirk that said we're getting close. My garage, once filled with lumber and tools, was now an operation center. Glitch's monitors hummed day and night. Robert checked in from his office downtown, feeding us documents under the guise of routine verification work. By Thursday, the picture was complete. Ryan Patterson wasn't just greedy, he was running a full-scale operation built on stolen federal funds, bribes, and shell contracts. The pattern was too clean, too deliberate to be coincidence. The man who humiliated me in public wasn't just arrogant, he was a criminal wearing a tuxedo. But the next step had to be careful. One wrong move, and he'd bury the evidence before we could breathe. That's when Daniel proposed something unexpected. "Frank," he said, leaning over my kitchen table, "we don't need to expose him yet. We need him to expose himself." I frowned. "You want me to bait him?" "Not you," he said, smirking. "Someone higher up. Someone who can make him brag." He slid a photograph across the table. A man in his late 50s, expensive suit, narrow eyes. "That's Congressman Blake Renner," Daniel said. "He's on the subcommittee for housing and urban development. His office oversees the grants Ryan's company's been exploiting." I raised an eyebrow. "And how are we supposed to get to him?" "We don't," Daniel said. "We make Ryan think he can." Glitch looked up from her laptop, grinning. "A digital mirage. We create a fake contact in Renner's office, someone offering a back-channel opportunity, priority access for upcoming veterans housing grants. Let Ryan think he's buying influence. He'll show us how he moves the money when he thinks it's a real deal." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "That's risky." "Everything worth doing is," Daniel replied. Robert agreed to help us draft the communication so it looked airtight, legitimate letterhead, legal phrasing, even a fake federal domain routed through encrypted proxies. It was art. Within 48 hours, an email landed in Ryan's inbox from K. Lawson at HUD.gov. The message was short, formal, and lethal. "Mr. Patterson, our office is reviewing potential partnerships for next fiscal year's housing allocations. Given your firm's reputation for efficiency, we'd like to schedule a private consultation to discuss expedited approval processes." It took less than a day for Ryan to bite. He replied within hours, oozing professionalism. "I appreciate the opportunity. Apex Holdings would be honored to contribute to future initiatives. Please advise on next steps." "Hooked," Glitch murmured. "Now we reel him in." That weekend, Ryan arranged a meeting through the fake contact. He offered to fly to D.C. immediately, but our imaginary Lawson suggested a preliminary discussion via secured video call. Glitch set up a fake video interface, no camera, just a HUD emblem, stock office sounds, and a digitally altered voice. When the call happened Monday evening, we recorded everything. Ryan appeared on camera, sitting in what looked like his office, leather chair, skyline behind him, confidence dripping from every word. "Mr. Lawson," he said smoothly, "Apex has handled several state contracts successfully. We can ensure efficiency and discretion at any scale. Of course, there are administrative realities, costs that fall outside the paperwork. There it was, the first hint of bribery. The words rolled off his tongue like he'd said them 100 times before. "Clarify administrative realities, Mr. Patterson," the altered voice replied. Ryan smiled, leaning forward. "We both understand how this works. Red tape slows progress. If there are hands that need to be acknowledged to expedite approval, Apex has protocols for that. Discretion is part of the service." I felt my stomach tighten as I watched him brag about corruption like it was a marketing skill. He kept talking, name-dropping associates, mentioning a fund labeled Legacy Partners, and promising a 3% consulting fee routed through a secure international channel. When the call ended, the silence in my garage was electric. Glitch turned from the screen. "We've got everything: voice, video, timestamps, transfer details. If this goes to the FBI now, it's over." But I wasn't ready. "Not yet. He needs to feel what I felt," I said. "He needs to stand in a room where everyone sees who he really is." Daniel looked at me carefully. "You're planning a public detonation." "Exactly." The following morning, I called Robert. "How fast can you organize a meeting that looks official?" He didn't even ask why. "Who needs to be in the room?" "Ryan, his investors, and his father, if possible." Robert exhaled slowly. "This is going to be one hell of a show, Frank." 3 days later, the stage was set. Robert booked a private conference room at the Wexler, a downtown hotel known for discretion. The kind of place where bad deals wore good suits. We framed it as a funding review meeting. Ryan's own lawyer confirmed attendance. He probably thought it was a chance to solidify his new government connection. Friday afternoon, the players arrived. Ryan walked in first, perfectly groomed, shaking hands with his investors as if the world still belonged to him. Behind him came 2 men from his firm and, to my surprise, his father, Alan Patterson, a retired banker with the expression of a man used to owning everything he touched. I stayed in the back corner, silent. Daniel handled the introductions. Glitch, disguised as a technical consultant, controlled the AV system from her laptop. Ryan launched into his pitch immediately, confident, rehearsed, insufferable. He flashed charts, graphs, projections. Talked about community revitalization like he was describing charity work, not fraud. Alan Patterson nodded approvingly, glancing at me once with mild disinterest, like I was part of the furniture. Then Daniel pressed a button. The screen behind Ryan flickered. His PowerPoint disappeared. Replaced by a frozen frame, Ryan, on a video call, speaking into the camera with that same smug grin. And then the voice. "We both understand how this works. If there are hands that need to be acknowledged." Ryan froze mid-sentence. His investors turned, confused. Alan's brow furrowed. The room filled with his own words, crystal clear. Every phrase about bribes, every expedited approval. And then, the final nail. Discretion is part of the service. He lunged toward the laptop, shouting, "Turn that off." Glitch didn't move. The video kept rolling, showing account numbers, transaction logs, his own signature beneath falsified contracts. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Alan Patterson stood, red-faced and shaking. "What is this?" I stepped forward. "Your son's business model." Ryan looked at me, pale, desperate. This is illegal, Frank. You can't." "Illegal?" I cut him off quietly. "Maybe. But so was stealing from the people you pretended to help." Alan turned to his investors. "Get out," he barked. "Now." They left without a word. Ryan was still sputtering when his father faced him. "You've destroyed this family name," Alan said. "You'll fix it, or I'll make sure every door in this city closes to you." He stormed out, slamming the door. Ryan slumped into a chair, shaking, muttering, "You think this ends me? You don't know who I am." I leaned in, meeting his eyes. "I know exactly who you are. And so will everyone else." Then I walked out, leaving him to sit in the silence he'd earned. That night, I didn't sleep again, but it wasn't the same kind of sleepless. It wasn't rage keeping me up now. It was satisfaction. Controlled. Cold. And when the sun came up, I wrote a final line in my notebook. The wedding was his stage. The next day, I built mine. The fallout from the Wexler came fast and messy. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my phone had 3 voicemails from unknown numbers and 1 text from Emily. "Dad, what did you do? Ryan says you ambushed him. Please call me." I stared at the screen, tempted to answer. I didn't. Not yet. Not until I could give her facts, not fear. Robert called first. "You lit the fuse," he said. "Now we make sure the blast goes where it should." "How?" "Chain of custody. Preservation. You gave them a show, now we give the law a file." By 9 a.m., I was in his office with Daniel and Glitch. We spread everything out: screen captures, the recorded call with Mr. Lawson, the Everlane maps, the Metro audit pulls, the transaction logs. Robert walked us through what could stand up and what needed a paper trail. "First," he said, tapping the Metro documents, "we send litigation hold letters, today, to Metro Financials, Everlane Partners, Apex Holdings, and attorney Dale Harper's firm. Certified mail, receipt required. It forces them to preserve emails, drives, backups. If they destroy anything after this, it's spoliation. Judges hate spoliation." Daniel grinned. "Hate is useful." "Second," Robert continued, "we file complaints with the HUD Office of Inspector General and the Texas Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. We'll attach exhibits, the shell company web, the sham bids, the veterans' housing losses. We include the video transcript, redacted so we don't burn our method." He looked at me. "We don't need to say, fake official. The bribery offer stands on Ryan's words alone." Glitch nodded. "Time stamps, IP logs, hashes, everything's forensically sealed." "Third," Robert said, "we protect your daughter. If she's on any joint account, she's collateral. We need a separation of liabilities and a temporary protective order over her personal funds. Also, I want her to sign a sworn affidavit that she had no role in company decisions." I exhaled. "She's not picking up." "She will," he said. "Crisis makes phones ring." He was right. At noon, Emily called again. I answered. Her voice was tight, shaky. "Dad, Ryan says you fabricated evidence. He says you hacked federal systems. He says you're trying to ruin him because you don't like him." "I don't have to like him," I said evenly. "But I do have to protect you." Silence. "Then, is it true? Any of it? Come by Robert's office. You'll see with your own eyes." She arrived an hour later, still in yesterday's makeup, hair knotted into a nervous bun. Robert walked her through the paper trail: 12 properties, $4. 6 million in public funds lost through inflated invoices, 3 nonprofits shuttered within 18 months, and Everlane acquiring the lots for cents on the dollar. When the video clip played and Ryan's voice filled the conference room, "Discretion is part of the service," she went pale. She covered her mouth. Oh God. I didn't speak. I let the evidence do what my words couldn't. Robert slid a short document toward her. "This is a limited power of attorney so I can wall off your accounts, cancel secondary cards, and file an affidavit separating you from Apex and Everlane. It's routine, but it needs your signature." She stared at the page, then at me. "If I sign this, what happens?" You stop being a target, I said. And you stop sinking with his ship. She signed. Her hand shook, but the signature was steady. That afternoon we overnight the hold letters, filed the complaints, and couriered copies to a contact of Roberts at the U.S. Attorney's Office, not a favor, just a heads up that something big was coming. We weren't trying to make headlines. We were building a runway. Ryan struck back that evening. A process server knocked on my door at 7:42 p.m. and handed me a cease and desist letter plus a draft complaint for defamation and tortious interference. The language was theatrical, fabricated recordings, malicious fraud, elder instability. There was even a proposed motion for a temporary restraining order to keep me from contacting investors. I read it twice, then handed it to Daniel. Well? He smirked. He's bluffing with twos. Robert filed our own motion the next morning, a motion to preserve evidence and a notice of intent to seek a receiver if Apex started moving assets. We attached the hold letters, the investor names, and a short declaration from Emily confirming she'd separated finances on June 12 at 2:18 p.m. time-stamped. Neat. By Friday, the first cracks appeared. One investor, an older woman named Linda Park, called Robert's office. She'd received a whispered call from Ryan telling her to ignore any rumors and delete old emails to reduce clutter. She didn't. Instead, she forwarded them to us. In one message from March 3, Ryan's fixer, Dale Harper, wrote, "Routing through Midway Resource Group avoids audit flags. Use invoice code 2207B. Do not CC outside counsel." "Do not CC outside counsel," Robert repeated, eyebrows up. "That's a confession wearing a tie." Glitch built an index. Dates. Amounts. Entities. Midway Resource Group became our favorite thread, tugging it pulled loose Pinnacle Bay LLC and Cedaline Materials, both with tiny post office boxes and the same contact cell registered under different names. The number popped up again on a delivery manifest for South Trinity Depot, a storage yard on the river where surplus materials were supposedly stacked for veterans projects that never got built. Daniel and I drove down at dusk. Chain link fence. A sliding gate. A hand-painted sign, "No trespassing." Through the links, rows of pallets sat under plastic wrap. Only they weren't cement bags or lumber. The lot was mostly empty. A yard for ghosts. We didn't hop the fence. We took photos from the public sidewalk and sent them to Robert with the property records, leased by Cedaline Materials, guaranteed by Everlane Partners, rent paid from an account that received consulting fees on the same days HUD grant disbursements went out. Dates matched. Lines connected. Saturday morning, Emily called from her apartment. "He came by," she whispered. He was calm. Too calm. "He said your stunt will backfire, and that people who stick their nose in business they don't understand get hurt." "Did he threaten you?" I asked. "No. Not with words. A beat. But he took the laptop he'd given me. Said it was company property." I glanced at Daniel. He nodded. "He's vacuuming." "Emily," I said, "did you ever email yourself anything? Contracts, tax forms, photos?" A pause. "I sent Mom's ring appraisal to my Gmail last month. And, there's a voice memo. From the night of the rehearsal dinner." "What's in the memo?" She swallowed. "He was drunk. He said, 'Your dad's small time. People like him follow rules. People like me write them.' I recorded it because it scared me." "Send it to Robert," I said softly. "From your phone. Not your email." Within an hour, Robert had the file. He called me, voice tight. "The metadata's clean. And there's background chatter that places it at Harrison Hall, the venue. This helps." Monday arrived with a different knock, This one from a U.S. postal inspector and a HUD OIG agent. They weren't dramatic. They were polite and clinical, asking short questions, noting times, taking copies, not originals, of our binders. They didn't promise anything. They didn't need to. Their calm was its own weather system. By midweek, Ryan's posture changed. No more bluster through lawyers, now it was shadow. A black SUV idled across from my house for 2 nights. Daniel photographed plates, routed them through a database, and traced them to a protective services firm with a downtown mailbox. Robert filed a police report and added the sightings to our preservation motion. Paper beats shadow. Every time. On Thursday, Alan Patterson called me himself. His voice had none of the swagger he carried into the Wexler. "I've retained independent counsel," he said. "If you provide your file to my lawyer directly, I'll guarantee full cooperation, bank statements, internal emails. I'm not going to prison for my son's ego." "Send your attorney's contact," I said. "We'll coordinate through Robert." He did. Within 24 hours, we had 12 gigabytes of internal correspondence from Patterson Capital Advisors, including 2 emails where Ryan asked his father's controller to advance invoices through Midway Resource Group to smooth cash flow before audit week. In one reply, the controller wrote, "This is not legal." Ryan answered, "It's temporary." Temporary is a sharp word when the wrong people read it. Friday at 10:06 a.m. Robert's paralegal stuck her head into the conference room where we were living on coffee and adrenaline. "You'll want the TV," she said. Local news flashed a banner, "Federal Inquiry into Dallas Development Firm." The anchor was careful, words like allegations and documents obtained, but the footage showed the South Trinity Depot gate and a file box labeled Apex/Ever Lane, 2023-24. No names. No grandstanding. Just the beginning. My phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. Emily. "He's gone," she said. "He left early. No note." "Good," I said. "Let him run. The paperwork doesn't." That afternoon, Robert slid a new document toward me, short, simple, devastating. "We're filing a civil petition on behalf of one of the nonprofits, Brentwood Homes Foundation. They folded last year after an Everlane flip. The board chair signed a retainer. What are we asking for? Accounting, disgorgement, treble damages under the Texas Theft Liability Act, and a temporary injunction to freeze the South Trinity lease and the Midway accounts." He paused. "We'll serve Dale Harper's firm Monday morning at 8:30. Let him chew that with his coffee." I looked at the stack. It wasn't showy. It wasn't loud. It was steady. Precise. Like a line of screws biting clean into new wood, each one pulling a joint tight. That night I sat on my porch with the notebook open on my knee. The cicadas were loud, and the heat of the day still clung to the railings. I wrote 3 lines, slow and neat, the way my shop foreman used to mark measurements. June 12, Emily clear. June 14, hold served. June 16, inquiry public. Then I added a 4th. Next, courtroom lights. Because humiliation loves the dark. But courtrooms are built with hard, bright bulbs and microphones that don't miss a word. And I intended to flip every switch. By Monday morning, the quiet was gone. The world around Ryan Patterson was beginning to fracture. What had once been whispers was now noise, slow, grinding, inevitable. At 8:32 a.m., Dale Harper's firm was served. The receptionist, calm but pale, accepted the thick envelope as 2 paralegals from Robert's office stood by and watched the clock tick. Time stamped. Proof of delivery. Within the hour, Harper himself called Robert, his usual swagger gone. "Robert, what the hell is this?" he barked. "It's called litigation, Dale," Robert said smoothly. "Your client built a house of cards on government grants. We're just the breeze. Harper sputtered about malicious intent and fabricated evidence, but Robert didn't argue. He just said, then file your answer, and hung up. That same morning, the temporary injunction hearing for the Brentwood Homes Foundation lawsuit was set for Friday. We had 4 days to prepare, and every one of them was loaded. Daniel and Glitch practically moved into Robert's office. The walls were lined with exhibits, flow charts, bank ledgers, property photos. Glitch built a timeline that ran edge to edge across one wall, each transfer, each shell company, each false invoice. The lines of red string looked like veins in a body. This is what corruption looks like, she murmured, pinning the final date, May 9, 2024, the day Everlane Partners received its last payout before the funds vanished. Ryan's legal team filed a countermotion late Tuesday, asking to dismiss on the grounds of lack of standing and defamatory conduct. Robert smiled when he read it. They're trying to delay. Delay is fear wearing a tie. We filed our response the next morning. Every page was evidence, not argument. Ryan's voice from the video, Dale Harper's, do not CC outside counsel, email, and Emily's affidavit confirming the ring appraisal and voice memo. But it wasn't enough just to win the injunction. I wanted it heard. Robert, I said quietly, when we go in there, let me speak. He frowned. You're not a lawyer. I'm a witness. You'll handle the law. I'll handle the truth. He considered that, then nodded slowly. 3 minutes. No more. Friday came sharp and clear, Texas heat pressing against the courthouse glass. The Dallas County Civil Court was smaller than I remembered, polished wood benches, a Texas flag, a quiet dignity that hummed under fluorescent lights. Ryan arrived flanked by 2 attorneys and his father, Alan. He looked thinner, paler. His tie was perfect, but his eyes darted too much. Alan didn't look at him. Emily sat behind me with folded hands. She hadn't said a word all morning. Judge Marianne Lopez, stern but fair, took the bench. Cause number 24, CV, 332, Brentwood Homes Foundation vs. Everlane Partners LLC at all appearances. Robert stood. Robert Jenkins for the plaintiff, Your Honor. A tall man with a slick haircut rose from the other side. Michael Corbin for the defense. Lopez nodded. Proceed. Robert laid it out cleanly, the veterans' housing funds, the shell companies, the false invoices. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't dramatize. He let the math speak. Then came our exhibits. Glitch connected her laptop to the courtroom monitor and displayed the flow chart, lines of money bleeding from one shell to the next until they pooled at Apex Holdings. Corbin objected. Speculative connections, there's no direct evidence tying my client to these transfers. Robert raised a hand. Your Honor, we anticipated that. Exhibit 14B. On the screen appeared the still frame from the video, the one with Ryan on the call, mid-sentence, mid-smirk. The judge leaned forward. Robert hit play. We both understand how this works. If there are hands that need to be acknowledged, Apex has protocols for that. Discretion is part of the service. The room went still. Even the court reporter paused before catching up. Corbin stammered, that recording is illegal entrapment. Robert calmly replied, it's an unsolicited business proposal made over an unencrypted channel. Perfectly admissible under Texas Penal Code Section 16.02, he wasn't coerced. He bragged. Judge Lopez glanced at Ryan. Mr. Patterson, is that your voice? Ryan swallowed hard. It sounds like me, but the context. Answer the question, the judge said. He hesitated, then nodded. Yes, that's me. Thank you, she said. Proceed, Mr. Jenkins. Robert gave me a nod. My cue. I stood, buttoning my jacket. Your Honor, I said, I'm not here as a plaintiff. I'm here as the man this began with, the father of Ryan Patterson's wife, Emily. A year ago, he humiliated me at his wedding reception. That doesn't matter. What matters is what I found when I started looking past the laughter. The judge watched me silently. I took a breath. Your Honor, this isn't about a personal vendetta. It's about trust, public trust. The same trust our soldiers had when they came home and believed there'd be a place for them. I buried men who believed that promise. And this man, I pointed to Ryan, took their sacrifice and turned it into a business model. The defense objected, but the judge waved them down. I went on. This evidence isn't mine. It belongs to every name carved on the memorial walls outside this courthouse. I don't want his money. I want the money returned to the families who lost it. When I sat down, the room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioning. Judge Lopez folded her hands. I've heard enough. She took a long pause before delivering her decision. Motion to dismiss, denied. Temporary injunction, granted. The defendants are hereby ordered to preserve all assets under Everlane Partners, Apex Holdings, and related entities pending further review. Furthermore, the matter is referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Texas for investigation under federal fraud statutes. Her gavel struck once, sharp as a gunshot. Ryan exhaled in disbelief. Alan stared straight ahead, jaw tight. Emily closed her eyes. Outside, the press had already gathered, word of the injunction had leaked. Robert shielded me from the microphones, but I caught fragments of questions. Is it true the funds were for veterans? Was this retaliation for a family dispute? I said nothing. The truth didn't need commentary. It was loud enough now. That evening, Emily came by my house. She stood on the porch, her eyes red but clear. He's leaving, she said. His lawyers told him the FBI's coming. He's trying to move money, but the accounts are frozen. You're safe? I asked. She nodded. For the first time in a long time, yes. She hesitated, then added, he said you ruined his life. I looked out toward the fading sunset. No, I said quietly. He ruined his own. I just turned on the light. 2 days later, Daniel forwarded me an encrypted email from one of his old contacts at the DOJ. The investigation was officially open. Apex Holdings was under federal scrutiny. Dale Harper's firm had been subpoenaed. The dominoes were falling, slow and steady. By Friday, the papers printed the headline. Veterans Housing Fraud Probe Expands, Dallas Developer Under Federal Investigation. Beneath it, a smaller subheading read, Source Credits Retired Craftsman for Uncovering Multimillion-Dollar Scheme. I folded the paper and set it beside my coffee. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just felt something I hadn't in years, quiet pride, not in revenge, but in resolve. For the first time since that awful night, the laughter that haunted me finally stopped echoing. That evening, I wrote one final line in my notebook. A fall on marble floors hurts for a week. Standing up afterward lasts a lifetime. And I closed the book. The week after the court hearing felt unreal. The house was finally quiet again, but it wasn't the lonely kind of quiet I'd lived with after the wedding, it was the calm that comes after a long storm, when the wind finally dies and the wreckage starts to make sense. Federal agents were moving fast. Daniel's contact at the DOJ called one evening and said, they've frozen every account tied to Apex, Everlane, and Midway. Patterson's name is red flagged at every major bank in Texas. The dominoes are falling. I didn't say much. Just thanked him and hung up. Then I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat at the kitchen table, and watched the sun go down through the blinds, a simple thing, but it hit different knowing justice was finally walking on steady legs. Emily came by 2 nights later. She didn't knock, she just opened the door and stood there for a second, holding a brown envelope. Dad, she said softly, you might want to see this. Inside were divorce papers. Filed. Signed. No hesitation. I didn't wait for his lawyer, she said. Robert helped me file it myself. I'm done with him. There was no bitterness in her voice this time, only exhaustion and clarity. I nodded. Proud of you. She smiled faintly. That's the first time I've heard you say that in a long time. Then maybe it's about time I started saying it again. She sat down across from me. They say he's trying to cut a deal, she whispered. Testify against Harper in exchange for leniency. I figured, I said. Men like him always trade loyalty for lighter sentences. What'll happen to him? Best case, he walks away broke. Worst case, federal prison. Either way, he won't be in your future. She looked down, twisting her hands. I still can't believe I didn't see it. You saw what you wanted to see, I said gently. That's not blindness, it's hope. It takes strength to let hope die when it's killing you. She nodded slowly. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. Live, I said simply. Start small. Find work that's yours. Build something that doesn't depend on anyone else's last name. She smiled again, a tired, genuine smile, and squeezed my hand. 3 days later, I met Daniel at the diner where we'd first discussed the case. He slid into the booth across from me with his usual dry humor. Well, you've officially gone viral, he said, dropping a newspaper on the table. Across the front page, humble father-in-law exposes Dallas developer fraud. I sighed. They make it sound like I did it for the fame. Daniel smirked. Doesn't matter why they think you did it. What matters is, people like you finally have a name that stands for something clean. He took a sip of his coffee. DOJ's prepping indictments. Harper's flipping too, cutting his own deal. He admitted to falsifying contracts, laundering funds, and bribing zoning boards. You set off a chain reaction. I stared out the window. And Ryan? Still denying everything. Claims it was Harper's doing. Won't last long. He'll break. Good, I said. Not because I want to see him punished, but because I want the truth to have teeth. Daniel chuckled. You sound like a man who should have been a judge. I've had enough judgment for one lifetime, I said. He grinned. Fair. Before leaving, he handed me a small flash drive. All the evidence, archived. Jenkins wanted you to have a copy, for your records. I turned it over in my hand. Guess that's one way to close a chapter. A week later, the DOJ announced the formal charges: wire fraud, conspiracy, and embezzlement of federal funds. Ryan Patterson and Dale Harper, co-defendants. The numbers were staggering, nearly $5.2 million misused. The story hit national headlines this time. Every outlet ran with it. Photos of Ryan in handcuffs outside a courthouse became the new public image of the man who once humiliated me for a laugh. The irony wasn't lost on me. Emily called that night. I saw the news, she said quietly. It doesn't feel real. It will, I said. Give it time. Truth settles slower than lies, but it stays longer. She hesitated. Do you ever regret it? Taking him down like this? I thought for a moment. I regret that it had to happen. Not that it did. I think Mom would have been proud of you, she said. That one hit hard. I had to look away for a second. I hope so, I murmured. Weeks passed. Reporters stopped calling. The court dates stacked up, and Robert handled most of it. I went back to my routine, early mornings, simple meals, fixing small things around the house. But something in me had shifted. I'd spent so many years shrinking myself, trying to stay quiet, to avoid making noise. The humiliation at that wedding had stripped me bare, but in doing so, it forced me to remember who I used to be before I got old and careful. One morning, Emily showed up again. This time, she wasn't trembling. She had a plan. "I've been talking to a few people from the Brentwood Foundation," she said. "They want to rebuild, a real veterans housing project this time, done right. They asked if you'd help design it." I blinked. "Design it? You were a craftsman, Dad. You built homes for people your whole life. You understand what makes a place feel like home. They want that. They want you." I didn't answer right away. I just stared at her, the pride rising slow but sure. "You're serious?" "Completely." She handed me a folder. Inside were sketches, plans, and a proposal letter with my name printed neatly at the top: Consultant, Design and Legacy Oversight. For the first time in a long while, I felt purpose wake up in my bones again. By late spring, construction began on Laura's Haven, a small community of 10 cottages for veterans and their families. Emily managed finances under Robert's guidance, and I supervised the builds. Simple, durable homes, oak beams, wide porches, quiet dignity in every line. One afternoon, as we walked the site, Emily looked at the first finished unit and whispered, "You did it, Dad." "No," I said. "We did." She smiled. "You still think too small." I chuckled. "No, sweetheart. I finally think just right." The day the ribbon was cut, I stood under the Texas sun surrounded by people whose names I didn't know but whose gratitude I felt. Veterans, families, kids running between the cottages. A brass plaque read, "Laura's Haven. Built from what was taken. Restored by what was right." I touched the metal with my fingertips. It was warm. Real. And when I looked up, Emily was standing there, tears in her eyes but smiling, not out of pity, not out of guilt, but pride. For the first time since the wedding, I realized I wasn't haunted anymore. That night, as the porch lights came on across the little community, I opened my old notebook and wrote one final entry. Justice isn't loud. It's steady. And it builds things that last. Then I closed it for good. 6 months passed. The world had moved on, but for me, every morning at Laura's Haven still felt like the first day of something new. The cottages stood quietly under the Texas sky, warm light spilling from their windows each night, laughter echoing through the little gravel lanes. Veterans who once had nowhere to go now had a place to heal. Families planted gardens. Children rode their bikes. Sometimes I'd sit on the bench near the flagpole, the one with my wife Laura's name etched into it, and just watch life happen again. That was my reward. Not revenge. Not headlines. Just peace. The federal trial came and went like a long storm in the distance. Ryan pleaded guilty to wire fraud and conspiracy, trying to soften the fall with cooperation. Harper got 5 years. Ryan got 3 and restitution orders that would take a lifetime to pay. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to. The law had done what it was supposed to do. Alan Patterson visited me once after it was over. He looked older, smaller somehow. "I liquidated everything," he said quietly. "Half went into the restitution fund. The rest I gave to the Veterans Foundation. It's the least I can do." I nodded. "It's a good start." He extended his hand. "You saved my soul from my own son's sins." "No," I said. "You saved it yourself by facing them." He nodded once, then walked away. I never saw him again. Emily became the director of operations at Laura's Haven. She worked long hours, handled grants, organized workshops for the residents. The same woman who once flinched at the sound of confrontation now stood in front of city officials and spoke with quiet authority. One afternoon she came to my workshop, a small shed behind the office where I still built furniture for the cottages. "Dad," she said, "a reporter called. They want to do a piece about the project, about you." I shook my head. Let them write about the veterans. I'm not the story. She smiled. You're wrong about that. But I'll tell them what you'd want them to know. The article ran a week later in the Dallas Chronicle. The headline read, "From humiliation to honor, the man who rebuilt more than homes." They quoted Emily's final line, "He didn't fight for revenge. He fought for dignity, his, and everyone else's." I cut the article out and pinned it above my workbench. Not as pride. As reminder. Every Sunday, I drive to the cemetery just outside town. I bring 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for Laura. I tell her about Emily, about the kids at the Haven, about the small victories that make a life worth living again. I always end the same way. I fell once, Laura. Hard. In front of everyone. But you'd be proud, I stood back up. The wind usually answers for her. A month ago, a young man from the Haven stopped me on the path. His name was Evan, a Marine who'd lost his leg overseas. "Sir," he said, "I heard your story. About what happened to you. I just wanted to say, you didn't just build homes. You built us a place where we feel seen again." I didn't know what to say. I just put my hand on his shoulder. That night I wrote my last note in the old notebook. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing what deserves to live in your memory. And then I placed the notebook next to Laura's photograph, closed it forever, and turned off the light. Because sometimes justice isn't a gavel or a headline. Sometimes it's a quiet evening, the smell of sawdust in the air, and the sound of laughter from a place that shouldn't have existed, but does.